Next up, we have Courtney from Cash Rewards talking about something that was a hot topic yesterday afternoon of personas that we can actually use. Who's built persona cards before? Who has used persona cards that you've built? It's a normal response for a room this size. Yep. So we were laughing about like whether it's B2B or B2C, putting aside how hard it is to get some of this information. Once I've got it, how do I actually then go and use that in messaging or segmentation and identify that this particular set of characteristics needs a different message than some other set of characteristics? So I was talking with Courtney earlier. She's got the answer. So I'm really looking forward to Courtney talking about persona cards we can actually use that make a difference. So round of applause for Courtney. Thank you.
Thanks, Andrew. I'm actually going to bring out a friend on stage because it felt a bit lonely up here. So this is Isaac. I'm going to introduce you to him in two ways, and you're going to tell me which is more compelling. Isaac's 28. He flat shares in Surrey Hills with a couple of friends. He earns around 90K a year as an account manager at Ogilvy. It wasn't Will, I promise, in a former life. He mainly shops on his phone, and he's really competitive, it really drives him. And that kind of transfers into how he shops. He loves a bargain. So that's Isaac intro number one. Number two, the independence. Oh, there we go. There's Isaac number one. Isaac number two is representative of the independents, or our young sinks and dinks. And they make up 20% of our current member base and 15% of the eligible population. He found us originally by being referred by a friend. He'd seen it on Ozbargain, but it wasn't very compelling. 54% of people like Isaac prefer to shop with eco-friendly brands. And 80% of them are on social media at least twice a day. And there are some of the brands that he likes the most. Now, which was more compelling? Isaac 1? Isaac 2? Couple of hands. So both of them are based on research, but you need storytelling to make your personas actually get take up in your organisation. Sales tend to think that they know best, right? They talk to so many more customers and prospects than you could possibly do in your personas research. Doesn't mean they don't have value. Product loves their product discovery process and thinks, oh, well, you're just finding them more generally. And our product team always just think we're wasting money. Our marketing team thought I was giving them the absolute bullseye for their media strategy. I was going to tell them exactly how their CPA could halve. I'm not a magician. I think I'm revealing amazing secrets that no one else could possibly know. What I'm really doing is finding nuggets of gold. And Kai Yang, in his Voice of Customer book, puts this really nicely. If you had some magic power and were able to discover exactly what customers were craving, and you also knew how to produce their dream product, you'd be guaranteed to get rich. Therefore, capturing the exact voice of customer is like striking gold. And for us, personas do sit in a broader voice of customer program at Cash Rewards. They come with customer journeys and other insights that we do. They don't solve the whole picture, but they're a really critical component of it. I'm Courtney Bain. I'm Product Marketing Lead at Cash Rewards. Prior to joining the scale-up, I spent over a decade in agency and client-side marketing roles, working for brands like HSBC, Shell, and Foxtel. I was really drawn to marketing originally because I was fascinated by consumer psychology. And my previous role was as a data and analytics tribe lead, so that's really going to fuse into the approach to personas that I'll share with you today. I'm also addicted to travel, and in Countdown, I get to go skiing in 7 weeks. and I am a Pilates and bar instructor on the side because you've got to have a side hustle, right? Hopefully, who's heard of Cash Rewards? Oh, yes, great. My brand team will love this. If you don't, we're a shopping gateway to cashback offers, sales alerts, coupon codes. We have over 2,000 brands like Booking.com, The Iconic, and Liquorland. I've made over $2,500 in 2 years of being a member. So I know everyone wants to get out their phone who's not a member and join, but just hold on. There's a promo code at the end, and you can get an extra 30 bucks. But we also have another audience, our B2B audience. The retailers, for them, we're a performance marketing channel that delivers incremental sales, brand exposure, and helps with brand switching in their category. When I joined Cash Rewards, people kept telling me that our customers were 40-year-old mums living in Melbourne who were on Ozbargain all the time. Given our base was over 1 million customers, that didn't mathematically make sense. So we launched into a personas project. And it got really good take-up. People kept talking about them. The CEO printed them out and put them in the back of his notebook. I was like, job done, that's great. But then I started to see how people were using them, and it was a bit tokenistically. Our 5 faces of personas were just on slide decks and people weren't actually using them. So what I want to do today is share some of our fails and share the process that we're going through in Take 2 that we're really proud of rolling out for B2C and now starting to do for B2B. So I just want you to take away at least one thing and not make the same mistakes that we did. For me, and this might be controversial for some, personas are a form of audience segmentation. I define personas as fictional customers based on research that are representative of a segment. They're the most likely profile based on identified SKUs. And then your segments are those collections or groupings of customers based on a data attribute. You have to be able to find it in data, regardless of whether that's in your CRM database or in media channels. And this is how it fits together for me. You've got your target audience, which is that overarching audience your marketing teams are striving to go after. And your ideal customer profile is a portion of them. You can't just go after them, there's not enough of them. Then your personas are the only type of segment that can influence that target audience. Those rich insights and data points that you're collecting can dictate what the marketing team are going after. Then the jobs to be done that is really where the product managers and product designers find extra value. I think they're best when they form off a persona, but you could look at doing some off your target audience if that's appropriate for your product. This is a question I got from our CEO. This looks great. Should they be everything we do around segmentation? No. You can't target a persona in media. There's for all these different types of audience groupings, you can message to each of them differently. But in channel, you can only do segments, jobs to be done, and target audience. And there's some examples up there on the screen of when you might be able to use them. And where this was really apparent was when I was not a product marketer, but I was leading a data and analytics tribe. And the marketing and research team came to me and said, we've got our personas. Can you go find out how many of them there are? The differentiator was mindset. I am not a mind reader, and neither was my database. So we found about 25 and/or criteria trying to kind of figure out maybe this kind of looks like, I don't work there anymore, so I can't tell you what it was called, but and it just made no sense. And then that figure of 1/5 of our base represent that persona, and I was like, no, they don't. We've just kind of guessed. What we should have done is said this is a new segment based on these characteristics that looks like that person, but is not like for like. But just because personas aren't the answer to everything doesn't mean they're not a really worthwhile investment. At Cash Rewards, they play 3 key roles for us. They provide a consistent understanding across the business of who our customers are. They provide a wealth of data and insights that you can use in creative briefs, in your positioning exercises, and then for messaging, which is where we've really got it over the line for B2B. And they're also that foundational input into your messaging and media strategy that you saw in that diagram before. So what worked well the first time? It wasn't all an abysmal failure. We showed the market size potential of each of our personas, and our CFO loved that. If you can do it, and it's probably not going to be possible for everyone's industry and business, but really valuable to show the potential for when your head of brand goes, but aren't we going after everyone? I've heard that a few times in the last day and a bit. Having a visual representation of who they are so people start to get more familiar with them, and limiting ourselves to 5. We're actually going to reduce that to 4. It's because there's no point having 10 personas. Are you going to have 10 different messaging documents and different battle cards or anything you're going to do with them? And is there too much overlap between them? Could you kind of group them together? And another really valuable thing was personas was the first kind of introduction of a product marketing concept at Cash Rewards. It meant that when we launched into positioning, we had enough insights to validate that. We didn't then have to go back and do additional research to show that we were doing it right the first time. Then there were some things we wouldn't do again. So we wouldn't have a generic shareable link for your quant with a pretty generous incentive. Within an hour of sending it to our first group, it was on Ozbargain. And while conversion rates in research are often a bit challenging and we want loads of people to answer our research call out, we were going to end up with this huge skew of data, and we really didn't want that. We wanted a really even spread. We had too many overlapping attributes between them. It was really hard to tell the difference, so people just leaned in on age because that was the only thing that they could see that was really different. And we didn't consider our priority segments up front. So Gen Z, huge focus for retailers and therefore for us. So we had to do a whole separate study to develop a Gen Z persona. It did come with a lot of benefits, and we got so much rich content from it, but it would have been good to know that up front. And then I was a purist. I was trying to do personas by the book, and so people would ask me questions and, oh, well, okay, how do I find them? Oh, you don't. They should validate your product discovery. How? Well, they should. So just start to listen to how people want to use them and then find ways to help them through that. So Take Two had 2 major changes for us. We added in data. So we used Commonwealth Bank IQ, which is a joint venture between Quantium and CommBank, which gave us a wealth of data. It's not the cheapest, but super valuable for us and had a lot of other use cases as well. We then used our media agency to pull some Roy Morgan data, and we've also purchased the For Love or Loyalty reports. Then we've also now positioned them and bundled them with an audience strategy. So we're not just having a pack with pen portraits go out and live on its own. It's being shared in that broader ecosystem of a target audience and jobs to be done as well. So this is what we've done in Take Two, the 5-step process. Maybe it'll work for you, maybe one of the steps will. First one is defining your scope. It doesn't need to be a generic personas research project. Look in your organisation for where you've got the biggest customer insight gaps. What are those phrases that you keep hearing over and over again in meetings and you're like, I just wish people would stop saying that because in my gut I know it's not true. Go squash those, like my 40-year-old Melbourne mum on Ozbargain. And look at the objectives. So if you're a growth business really focused on acquisition, yes, customer insights are really valuable, but you have to speak to prospects as well. It's harder, it's more time consuming and often a little bit more costly, but you can't only speak to them if acquisition is a big focus for you. And this is when socialization also begins. Align with your key stakeholders on the objectives and how they might start to use them so they feel brought on board from day dot. This was another question we got asked. Should the data guide who our personas are, or should we create that segmentation up front? It really depends on how well you already know your customers. So for the B2C first iteration we did, we had no idea. We didn't have a lot of first-party data, so we let the quant kind of guide those personas and then did qual after, which is really kind of opposite to how we'd normally conduct research. In the B2B space, we had all our client services and salespeople who know those customers and kind of where we want to head. So we dictated the 5 segments that we thought we needed. And the benefit of that, if you do already know, they can still change. It doesn't mean that the research won't mean that you get a better outcome. But you don't want to speak to 8 people from one segment that you kind of already knew quite well and then have one person from a growth segment. So you have to kind of think about that. Next one is when you're actually conducting it. And I would say there's a kind of set kind of opening, maybe 10 minutes, and if you're doing an interview, and then a couple of questions when it's a survey. But then you need to leave time for topics that your stakeholders and you are interested in. So we had our social media manager came to us and was like, I really want to use your personas, but I don't know how. So not only are we helping him, but when we did our next set of quant, we chucked in 4 questions really specific about social media and content. I had to scrub out the numbers, but you can see who likes what a little bit more, so up on the screen. That said, people get really excited if you give them too much of a rope. So you do have to regulate how much is going in there. And also not everyone has as much experience with research. So people might start to be like, oh, can we ask this question? And you're like, there is no value to asking that question. And if you don't do that, you end up with this, which is the first survey that we had up. How long did the cash rewards survey take you? It's pretty embarrassing, but hey, I'm going to be honest, and now our surveys are much shorter, which is good. The other thing with research, and particularly in B2B, where it's really hard to get people to give up time to speak with you, is make it seem fun. You know, we're marketers. It doesn't have to be that boring white email with a logo up the top and 3 paragraphs of why we value your feedback and we really listen to you. You know, you can be a bit more playful with it. This is an example from Shafiq and my team. I'm not going to take credit for his work about how we've done it. And we have got everyone we need to speak to for our B2B personas in a relatively short time frame. Also, leverage your senior leadership team and contacts through the organisation. So we got our CFO and all our executives were sharing this on their LinkedIn. You never know who has a friend or a friend of a friend that might be really good to speak to. And the other thing in this phase is get the right research tools in place. So for our Voice of Customer panel, we use Great Question. It means we can start to collect attributes that might create that lookalike segment to our persona. And we also are using Ask Nicely for CX and NPS measurement. Again, we can, based on responses, append it to a profile. And so you're just continually collecting data around those personas and segments that you want to get take up in your organisation. You're not reliant on that annual research project to fill that. The third step is the one that is often forgotten, adding in some data. So you can find it from an array of sources out there. Like I said, we did some third-party data with CommBank IQ, but you can look at reviews sites, white papers, news articles, the CMO report, CIO report, SimilarWeb, and Data.ai that has a couple of things around cross-app affinity and things like that you can start to really add to the qual that you're doing. And it definitely helps with traction, particularly for more numbers and analytically focused stakeholders. And just kind of compare the cost as well. Like some of those reports might be a couple of $1,000s, but if you were to do your own research, that's got not just the cost of it, but the resource cost of you running it, and particularly if you're the only product marketer in your organisation. This slide has been the most, I had to take up the numbers, but the most powerful and commonly used in our organisation of showing that existing base of your customers, how many have you got that look like this, and what's that opportunity in the market. And then we're starting to get even closer to data with how we're doing it in phase 2. It's all illustrative data, so I'm not giving anything away. I promised our legal team. But looking at in analytics, in Meta's ad manager, in our great question voice of customer panel, where are the people that you can find that look like that? Again, not saying they are that person, but they look like it. And then to the fun part, and I get to talk about my mate up here, Isaac again. Socialising. So we started with the pen portraits going up in the office, and we put customer testimonials, people that were representative of that with quotes, so they felt really real. That was our objective the first time, was for these to not feel fictional and like characters in a storybook that I had made up. But in our next phase, we're leveling up. We're going to have life-size cutouts like Isaac around the office, so you can literally bring the voice of the customer into the room. But we're hybrid, so we also are having a version we have people working in Vietnam, in the Gold Coast, all over. So we're going to have video call backgrounds so you can have your persona sitting on your shoulder, keeping you honest. And durable handouts, so people can also have that kind of on their desk at all times, which is a combination of quotes, stats, and things like that. We're going to launch our new ones with an all-company Kahoot quiz of who's more likely to, and next year we're launching a new monthly induction for new starters at Cash Rewards, get to know our customers and our competitors. So that's really establishing that value that product marketing is bringing to the organisation as well. The other part of this, I'd say, is keep names simple. I know it sounds quite obvious. Alliteration is great. I think for personas, like, just embrace it. It's a bit lame. It gives everyone a chuckle. But don't make them convoluted so people get a bit shy when they want to use them, but they're like, we had one called tightrope walkers, and people would always kind of trip over their words. So keep them really simple and easy to say. This is a question we debated in our product marketing team of what they should look like. We chose stock imagery so they felt like a real human, and we use illustration a lot in our creative. So we really wanted to differentiate there. But it's really up to you, personal preference of what you think is going to get the most cut through. People are going to get really focused on, okay, so they all look like this. Maybe play with illustrations. Spotify do this in a really nice way if you want to have a look. And then review annually. It's quite a lengthy process to do personas well, so invest the time. Don't do them amidst a go-to-market or a really busy period. Do them well so that you don't have that niggling feeling in the back of your mind, oh, I've got quite a few gaps, or I don't have enough qual on one of the particular personas. You know, give yourself the time to do them properly, and then use those tools like Great Question and Ask Nicely. There's a myriad of others out there, so you're continually building on the ones that you've got. And my final piece of advice, and I had to use alliteration because we're talking about personas, is to make sure they're practical and not perfect. They don't have to be by the textbook or what you read about the difference between personas and segments and archetypes and that online. Make sure they work for your organisation. If you keep getting the same questions from your sales or product teams of like, but can't we target them? No, we can't. They're not designed for that. We'll find a way for them to be able to be targeted in a different way. For product discovery, we said, oh, could you use them to validate? Not really. So we're working them on a jobs to be done workshop, and that's going to be our way in. Because once people start to use them once, they will find their own ways within their department to start using them. And I did promise you a promo code. If the QR code doesn't work for you, if you're a little bit far away, come speak to me, Jax or Shafiq, and you can get a $30 bonus when you sign up to Cash Rewards. Hey, it is Singles Day, Cyber Monday, Black Friday, Click Frenzy all coming up. I don't know, there's usually an alcohol deal on a Friday or Uber Eats. So definitely check it out and become a member if you're not already. Disclaimer, you do have to shop in 7 days to get the $30, but I think you won't have a problem with that. Thank you so much. I've got time for some questions.
Awesome. I'll move out of the way. So I loved that. That's basically what we were discussing over dinner last night. But which questions gave the most insightful answers during the research phase? Maybe which types of questions?
I think in the qual, we asked how they would describe cash rewards and what prevents them from referring. Kind of opening up how they're speaking about us in the wild was really valuable, as well as kind of prodding them on pain points that we know, like you know the weaknesses of your product. So things like, do you forget to use us? Oh yeah, and so you can nudge those things. I think there's a real kind of fear of like it all has to be open questions and get people to speak about their experiences. But sometimes then you miss topics that you really want intel on. So don't be afraid to do that. And in quant, I think we've probably got the most value. Probably when we ask them about brand preferences and how they shop and things like that.
Excellent. How would you go about doing this for personas on a much smaller user base, say less than 500 people?
Yeah, I would start obviously with your qual research, and probably if you've got a much smaller base, I'd probably limit yourself to 3, no more than that, and then look for white papers, industry reports, and things like that to really add the data points that you're after. And it can be macro factors. It could be, I don't know what industry you're in, but for marketing, how inflation and cost of living is likely to influence marketing and media budgets next year. There's plenty of research and things being done around it, rather than trying to rely on surveys, which you might not get with such a small base.
Excellent. How do you measure success and make sure people actually use the personas? The example is that they have them as posters in the wall and they just become part of the furniture and people walk past them. How do you keep them top of mind?
Yeah, so an example in our creative and brand team is in the concept briefs, we made a section that is audience and it says persona, like they can't not fill in the persona section. For sales and client services, we produce a lot of content for them about how they use them because they love going out and speaking about our base. Product is where we've probably had the weakest take-up. So that's where we're focusing on having a whole separate workshop and session with them, really focused on that jobs to be done. So really looking at how they work and those individual use cases. But for all our work, they're used. But we've been quite lucky. I think there's a real appetite in our organisation for them. So also making them fun. Like people kind of want to then use them.
Very, very true. For B2B focused products, how might you decide when to focus your efforts on building buyer personas versus the user personas when they're not the same?
Depends on what you're more focused on as your objectives and I guess where your product life cycle is at. Being that I'm from a CRM background, I'd generally say start with the user because they can influence the buyer in some instances, and also they're the ones that are going to be more valuable long term in ensuring that they don't flip to a competitor or something like that. So I would generally start with who's going to use it, and that can be part of your narrative for buyers of, well, this is who in your organisation is going to actually be doing the doing with it. We're lucky in that most of the time our buyer and user is the same, so we haven't needed to differentiate, but that's how I approach it.
Okay, so that answers the next question then. How long does it typically take you to build this sort of comprehensive persona base?
2 months, roughly, from kind of start to finish, of setting those objectives, socialising it with key stakeholders, conducting the research, and analysing. Yeah. So it's time consuming. But also once you've got them, you start to save time. And that's obviously not also everything we're doing. We're doing many other projects at the same time.
A critically important one, and this is new, allegedly asking for a friend. Is Isaac doing anything after the summit this evening?
Yeah, he's shopping on cash rewards, obviously.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Courtney.
Thank you
I
so
learned a lot.
much.
Thank you.